Got it. All right. Thank you. So welcome everyone. Welcome to the What is Patterns Overview webinar, and we'll be sharing how this is a multi-district and STEM hub collaboration. I'm Kristen Harrison, Executive Director of the Portland Metro STEM Partnership. Thrilled to be here with you all today. Off to you, Susan.
Hey, and I'm Susan Hallback. I am currently working with the Portland Metro STEM Partnership, but I was a former TOSA at Beaverton School District when this all began, and also an administrator at Portland Public Schools, a science administrator.
Excellent.
So
thank you.
I will advance.
Okay. We're happy to share that folks who attend get paid to be here. And this is a bit of an overview of that. I just put a link into the chat. We'll put a link to hold on one moment. I think I placed it before folks joined. So you'll have a link to the slide deck as well as a link to the attendance. So please do note your attendance in there. We'll paste this in there a couple of times, but please do register your attendance or note your attendance in there. And we'll be using an idea capture tool. So I pasted that in the chat as well. So do please make use of those. Thank you, Susan. So this project is funded by an Oregon WRAP grant, Well-Rounded Access Program grant. There are actually two grants. One is to Portland State University and one is to Eastern Oregon University. And we'll explain that partnership in a minute. Again, you see the note in there about taking attendance. So please do fill out that really quick attendance form just to confirm that you're here. PSU is who issues payments for your attendance, and it's essentially a two-step process. The first one, you'll be invited to register in a system called PaymentWorks, and that generates an ID. So that lets you be a vendor with Portland State and receive that stipend. Once that has occurred or shortly thereafter, the second step is a stipend form will be emailed to you and for your digital signature. We have folks who attend numerous sessions with us, and so we'll be paying for each at the end of each semester. So August through January and then February through June. We are looking at having a payment in the middle there as well, but we got to get our systems lined up to ensure that we can do that effectively. So for right now, we're looking at assuring you that there will be those two payments for those two windows of time, and it follows that two-step process. If you're ever stuck or concerned, please reach out to myself or to Susan, and we're happy to help. As you're here, and if possible, for those of you who are driving, you are you don't need to do this. If you go to the next, if you go to the next one, if you can update your identity here to rename yourself, to give us your first and last name and your school district, that would be really helpful and give us a sense for who's here and give the other attendees also a sense for who's here. For those of you who are driving, disregard. We'd love for you to continue your excellent driving.
Very important.
Yeah, very, very, very important. And in that idea capture tool that's in the chat, if you don't mind popping in there and please noting what drew you here today and what you hope to learn. So please do hop into that and share your thoughts, because our goal is to meet those needs. And what drew you here, we want to respond to that, and what you hope to learn, we want to meet that interest and that need. And as the webinar progresses, please do add any additional questions that you have. If you'd like us to follow up by email or anything that you're hoping for, please do note that in there, and we will do our absolute best, either during this session or shortly thereafter. So for folks, if you'll click on that, we have a note here, unable to edit. So let's work on that. Okay. Do you mind giving that a
I will do that.
Susan? Cool.
I will change that. My apologies. Okay,
Thank you, Karen, for being our first tester. We appreciate that. Appreciate your help there. All right.
And the reason I'm asking you to put this in the idea capture tool as opposed to the chat is just that we can go back and look at this and kind of review for a future PD, or if we talk to another group about this, what are the things that people are hoping to get out of this kind of a conversation? So we appreciate you just taking a minute to let us know what what you were hoping to learn, and also to make sure today that we address those issues if we're able to.
Absolutely. Okay, give folks just a.
I see people are starting to write in it. So maybe we can just give a minute there for people to kind of capture their ideas, and then we'll move on.
Excellent. I see your note there, Emily. Yes, absolutely. Oh, thank you.
Oh, yes. And if you're driving, we totally appreciate
Yeah, please
you stay
just
safe.
keep that great driving going.
We know that this time is really hard, but we really don't want to go into your dinner time either. And so we are just trying to find the best time to start these webinars. If anybody wants to put out in the idea capture tool, there's like, I think part 3 is anything else we should know. What the ideal time for starting a webinar would be, we'd be appreciative, because we really struggle with when that would be, and are trying to be responsive to your needs.
Yep.
Well, we hope that you will add to that as we go.
Yep.
And we're going to move on, I think.
Excellent. Yep. Quick overview for our goals today. Again, we are wanting to address the notes and needs that you have put into are putting into the idea capture tool. So this list of goals is editable with your input. But really our focus is around why a common sequence? What's the thinking behind that? Why do it? Why patterns specifically? We'll go over the key features of patterns to give you a sense for that and an opportunity to ask some questions. The impacts for teachers, for districts, and for students, and then the open sources, the resources that are available. So those are our goals for today. And I think the next one is over to you, Susan.
Okie doke. So why a common sequence? This is really the core place where this work began. And one of my favorite quotes is here, the decision to withhold rigor from some students is one of the most important reasons why schools fail. And I could see in the district where I was working, I was a middle school science teacher, and I taught 7th grade, and then I also taught 6th through 8th grade at a different school. That there was some secret knowledge kind of going on as kids went from 8th grade to 9th grade. And some kids knew what rigorous pathways to enroll in as 9th graders into at the high schools. And they were either advised by their teacher, and their teacher told them, oh, you should take this course, it's the more difficult course. Their parents knew that there was like system knowledge that some people held and other people's didn't. And when I became a TOSA, I could actually look at the data of enrollment in the schools and see that there were definitely some students who were going into these rigorous pathways, and they could be predicted by their socioeconomic status and by their race. And there were others that were accessing lower rigor courses and were never taking high rigor courses. And so one of my things that really drove me was that if we have one sequence, then there is no secret knowledge. Everybody takes the first course as a 9th grader, the second as a 10th, and the third. Around this time, Oregon switched to 3 years of required science for graduation. Prior to that, it was 2. And then we know that all kids at least have their foot in the door for having access to rigorous courses. What we found was that every one of our comprehensive high schools at the time in Beaverton, there were 5. Every single one had a different freshman course. It varied from an integrated course. It varied from trimester courses. At some courses, they were starting with an earth science. Some schools are starting with earth science. Some they were starting with physical science. Some were starting at biology, and then from there it was madness. And so I decided to plot them out, and learned that at Beaverton we had 188 different pathways a student could take. And at Portland Public, it was almost 250 when we did the same exercise there. There was even more choices. And so when we have kids taking courses and all sorts of different combinations, it's really hard to build rigor from one course to another. Like, how do you build on a course as a sophomore if they could have taken 4 or 5 different things as a freshman? And if a student is moving and they're moving from school to school to school, and there may not even be a similar course to what the pathway would have been at one school that doesn't even exist at a second school. So this was one of the reasons why we decided we need one way to go. So how did we do that? Well, we looked at our own data and looked to see, could you predict pathways based on various demographic factors? And do some pathways provide a better preparation for students? And we did look at national level research and saw that a full year of physics, chemistry, and biology, not necessarily in that order, but a full year of each of those subjects, if a student had those, then they had higher SAT and ACT scores. Because we knew that trend was happening at the national level, we wondered, is that the same thing that's happening at our school district? And we asked that question. And then we looked at our data and we said, yeah, that's happening at our district as well. And we were finding that the kids that were taking full year courses were a very small percentage of our overall students. At the time when we began this, only 11% of our students took a 4-year of physics in Beaverton. And so there was only 11% of kids that were taking or less that were taking a full year of all 3. So that was a problem in our estimation. We also saw that there was inequitable enrollment in advanced and dual credit courses. I could walk through our high schools and see one girl in an advanced physics course. I would see no Hispanic students in advanced courses. I would see a lot of white, Asian, and males in the physical science courses, and then females in the biological sciences. And so there was gender issues, there was race issues, there's socioeconomic issues. So, and then we saw a large variance by race on the various state testing. I recommend that any district go through this analysis, whether you decide to do patterns or not. Coming up with a common pathway, if you have multiple high schools, is one of the greatest things that you can do to support equity. And it is not at a cost to advanced courses, which is what many people think. And I'm going to show you some data that shows how enrollment in AP and IB courses and dual credit courses has increased as a result of doing this. It has not decreased. So this curricular coherence is another favorite quote, and this is about that idea of intentional course sequences allow intentional building of rigor so that we can get kids ready for college, career, 2-year degree programs, whatever their post-high school needs and goals are, that we're making them ready for that by being intentional about building rigor. And we know that the NGSS standards are really standards that students are to achieve by the 11th grade. They're a grade band standard. And I know that most of you have probably read them. They're complex. And what we're expecting, if you look at the rubrics, the learning progression rubrics that NGSS provides, that what we're asking students to do by 11th grade is really rigorous. And so we feel that you have to really start on that ladder as freshmen to get them there by 11th grade. You just can't expect them all to be able to do it in 11th grade, especially if your goal is all standards, all students. So this is just our process, and like what also supported by research is figuring out those sequences, looking at your own ACT or other data, whatever test that you take, your students take as juniors, determine what sequence leads to greater success in your system, and then require students to take those sequences. So why patterns? So patterns was part of the solution. We made the decision to go to a single science sequence first. That was our equity decision, that all students would have access to common courses, that mobile students could move from school to school to school and not lose time or have redundancies because there were completely different courses that they were enrolled in. We decided that we needed to set up the system for our most vulnerable students and to get away from this idea that those who have more information, that kind of idea of secret science, we had to eliminate that. We wanted to be fully transparent. Once we got and made that decision to go and have a common sequence, we were like, what are those courses? Because we knew that that all like the standards were coming. Several of us that were doing this early work were also reviewing NGSS standards before they were Oregon standards, while they're still being developed by Achieve. I and Bradford Hill, who's the writer of the patterns, or the initial idea of patterns, we both went back to Washington, D.C., and we worked with Achieve on the standards for several times. So we kind of knew what was coming as far as the three-dimensionality, the rigor, and we knew that what we had, which was basically textbooks and teacher-directed learning for the most part, was not going to cut the mustard when this came out. So not only did we need to change the sequence or develop a sequence, we needed to make sure that the courses in the sequence would work for a freshman, sophomore, or junior, that there was this rigor, et cetera, that we've been talking about. So, so we started looking at what are the features that we wanted, what's the order that we wanted. And in Beaverton, when we made this decision, I invited, we had representations from, what started off was, we call it a science articulation group, where we had representatives from every high school, at least one chemistry, one biology, one physics in the room talking about this, looking at the data, and then looking what sequence do we do. And then the standards came out, we could look at the standards and we could see, man, there are so many biology standards. There is no way we could have a freshman biology course, which was probably the most, the largest freshman course at the time was either a freshman biology or a freshman physical science, as far as across the district and actually across the state. So we thought, okay, biology has to go at the junior level. And so that leaves physics and chemistry. And we really thought physics has a lot of engineering and hands-on, and you can do a lot of experiments, and we could make it a very active class. And wouldn't that be enjoyable for freshmen to give them a love of science? And chemistry is, a little more technical. So let's do physics first and chemistry second. by the time that we got to this point, every single science teacher was in a room and voted with a consensus vote to do a physics first sequence. This was not something that came top down from the district. This was something that the teachers agreed to, made the most sense with our data and with what we were looking at for the NGSS standards. And I think, Kristen, you could put the link in the chat for the action plan that is the plan that we used at Beaverton to change from what we had to a physics first sequence. So this is just our process overview. And the other thing is, and I'm just going to kind of look at this, expand patterns beyond physics. At the time that we were doing this, one teacher, Bradford Hill at Southridge, had a 12-week physics course in one of those trimester courses that was patterns physics. And that's the only, it lived there. And it was basically like unit 1 and unit 2, like of the current process. And actually it's been they've been greatly changed since then. And then we made this decision, well, that idea of patterns, of using the mathematical modeling, was something that we wanted to do in all of our courses. So we had to expand patterns beyond physics. And this has taken us many years. And I'll be honest that we're still working on this in all of our courses. And we'll talk a little bit about that. And this NGSS alignment, we're still working on this. We're working with a NGSS expert who is reviewing our curriculum and giving lots of great feedback about how we can be better aligned with NGSS. And we're trying to implement those changes. And this ongoing revision based on feedback is based on the NGSS reviews that we're currently running through the RAP grant, the equity reviews that we're currently running, the feedback from teachers and focus groups, and then just ongoing teacher feedback. So it's a living curriculum that is, we work our best to try to improve. And just a little bit of overview on the NGSS alignment. This was just to show you that there's those 28 life science performance expectations living in biology. And the physical science are divided between physics and chemistry. And then the earth science are divided across all 3 subject areas. So that's just was our approach. We know that there's other approaches and other ways that performance expectations have been mapped into courses. And that is really up to each district. Oregon allows for that because they're grade band standards. This was just our solution. And then all 4 engineering standards are in all courses. Climate change is important in Oregon. It's always been important to us. We've tried to be intentional about putting climate change into all of our courses, and also that integrated engineering and computational thinking. We do have the link here for the NSTA article that Bradford wrote in 2013, if any of you want to see the original article. And I think Kristen is going to put that in the chat, so thank you. And this is central question that is through all of our courses. And this is really what patterns is. This is like the definition of patterns. How do we find and use patterns in nature to predict the future, make data-informed decisions in the present, and understand the past? And one of the things that was an early on aha for me when I first started listening and talking with Bradford was that because the way that I learned physics was, here's a formula, and then we had word problems, and then I basically as a student, I felt my job was to make sure what information I needed to plug into the formula, what was the false information I needed to ignore, and then how do I get the right answer? I had no idea, at least the way that it was taught for me. And I took it through college, like where those formulas came from, that they were the result of hundreds or thousands of empirical experiments that were done by scientists, and that the formulas were sort of the shortcut to get to where you could make predictions for data points that you personally had not taken yourself. And I think that by teaching this idea through patterns, we're helping students understand how scientists think and work, and why we experiment, and what's the purpose of experimentation. And this idea of to make decisions in the present and understand the past becomes really important when you're on the cutting edge science. If we're able to teach students through very straightforward in physics experiments where balls and down ramps, etc., and we can show them that they can use that data and make a prediction of where that ball is going to land off of the ramp, it becomes easier for them to trust complex models of climate change and other like genetic engineering when they become juniors, because we've laid this foundation of data-informed decisions with very observable experiments. And then we can go and say, okay, but science gets to where we can make our best, we can make our best prediction based on what we know now, but there may be new information and new science coming in that we don't know that will come in through different experiments. And we're going to make a better prediction when we have that. So that's why we are also interested in talking about level of confidence and error. And I think I will talk about that in just a minute. And then there's these patterns approach steps. So these are the same steps that we would use in any patterns lab in physics, chemistry, or biology. And we call this a wild guess. Guess a reasonable answer to a teacher prompt, usually a demonstration or something like, what do you think is going to happen? We want that wild guess to be wildly wrong, but maybe the kids have some information and they make a better guess. And then we develop a question and hypothesis of what kind of pattern do we think is going to happen. Then we're going to collect some data and we're going to analyze it. And this all important, find the line of best fit. This is where Desmos is coming in now. We used to do this on whiteboards with rulers. You can still do that if you want. But Desmos does allow a little bit more sophistication in finding that line of best fit. Then having conversations, which is really important to build consensus around what does that pattern actually mean? What does the slope of the line actually mean? What is that representing in the real world? What is that? That slope means something. It's the intersection of two variables interacting with each other. Craft an evidence-based line of reasoning, so supporting your conclusion with data and then making a prediction with that confidence assessment. And that confidence assessment basis is based on how good your data is, how close is your new data from the data that you actually took. Is it far or was it within the range? And having these conversations that scientists have about data quality and the meaning of data and why we take data. So each course builds on the previous courses, and this is an overview of how we build patterns, the mathematical patterns across physics. We start with the simplest, a linear, quadratic, inverse, inverse square, and we know that that algebra 1 does not get to inverse and inverse square, and we're working through a MathWays grant to try to make this a little bit easier for kids who are dually enrolled in algebra. But we have found that since we started patterns, and in both school districts, that students are doing better in algebra than they were before. And algebra was the most failed course in both of those districts. Physics has observable systems. There's not a lot of hidden variables, although we do talk about friction and things like that. But students can understand it. They can generally observe the cause and effect of things. It's concrete, it's hands-on. And when we get into chemistry, we have like more sophisticated patterns. We have periodic table trends, which can be variable depending on what trend you're looking at. There is this macroscopic observation of microscopic interactions. And so this idea that we have to understand what things are doing at the particle level, and those interactions of bonds and breaking and forming and particles moving, we can't see that. There's no microscope that we have in our schools that allows that. And we have demonstrations that can kind of show that, but at the atomic level, the molecule level, we aren't seeing those. So we have to kind of have this trust in science that we build on in physics, that I see this observation, and this observation allows me to make predictions of what's happening at the level that I can't see, and I'm going to trust science that is what is actually happening. The labs and activities are more complex. Sometimes they take multiple days. In chemistry, there's some labs that can take up to 4 days. And then we're building the foundation for modern biology, because when biology was taught as a freshman, it was more old-fashioned biology, like taxonomy, and things that are no longer in the standards. And so we wanted to make sure that we could move into the molecular biology and understanding about organic macromolecules and DNA. And we wanted that chemistry foundation to be able to understand and talk about that in biology. In biology, we're adding statistics of standard deviation. We have predator-prey, and other kinds of patterns that are combinations of linear and limits, or linear and quadratic, where it's linear at one point and it changes to exponential at another point, or back again. So we have these very kind of complicated patterns that are combinations of others. And we have this causality that's established through statistics, not through observations. So that idea that populations are so variable, and looking at t-tests and things like that allow us to make more scientific determinations of causality. And then
building off of building off of what Susan noted, is really what are the key features of patterns. And so starting here again, the big ideas of science. We back up one, Susan.
Oops, sorry.
How are students, how are they using those ideas? So again, the user. And when you hear each of these parts, one of the things I would ask for each of you is, what is the counter to that? Kind of what is the traditional of that? So instead of students using ideas, so running the ball down the ramp, graphing the data of the position of the ball over time, and then predicting where the ball would be if run again during times that they didn't measure, they are using the idea of science, that acceleration, that constant velocity when it reaches constant, to answer a question, to do something, versus being told how it is, which is really our traditional model. If we look on to the next, students, really engaging students as talkers about their thinking, about their reasoning, about what they see, about what they think about that. I mean, we are social creatures, and we must reason. And so how can we build and learn from each other, build teams, et cetera, and really explore what we are doing together? And having this student talk is a key part of that component. and really empowering that. And it is definitely a challenge and something that teachers find and have to really learn how to do. But it is also one of the most rewarding for students learning and teachers later as well.
So one of the
Mhm.
one of the things that we have developed in physics, these visual storylines, we are working to develop for all of the courses, that we realize that this is an area of growth for us, and but we are trying really hard to provide this coherent framework that allows each lesson to connect in an intentional way to a previous and future lesson.
These storylines, we're building them out and making them even better all the time. And it's really helpful for students to tie these different concepts to something, to an overarching narrative and storyline. And so we're excited to have those happen and continue to have them become even better over time. As Susan mentioned before, we start with that wild guess. And what we find is that it's rarely correct. Good. How can we gather information to make a better prediction? How can we make sense of that? How can we ask an even better question to get even better data? What is that? How can we actually think about and reflect on and measure our confidence in the data that we have? How can we then use that data, use our best data to make informed predictions moving forward? And so this pursuit of better and better data and how that affects our thinking and our reasoning and our planning, and in patterns, not only is this on the science side, kind of the gathering of knowledge or the gathering of understanding side, it's also then applied in engineering challenges. So how can our knowledge of, the blades on how number of blades affects a wind turbine, how this angle of the blade, the length of the blade, the material of the blade, you can measure how that affects blade speed, and then I can apply that to my design to try to optimize. So this idea of information, not only for better understanding, but also to apply in those engineering challenges.
So
our design principles, yep, I'll put them in the chat.
So the design principles have been are really the foundation of what we look at when we're designing patterns curriculum. And there's 8 of them, and we're going to share our document with you, which has a little bit more detail than what we're going to go here on the PowerPoint. But I just wanted to say that we've created patterns as this teacher developed curriculum by teachers working full time, and it's sometimes in the early days working just ahead of a lot of teachers that were then going to teach it. So we have it's definitely been a process. We are not a curriculum company that has a staff of people writing curriculum. Everybody who writes this, who's on the council, are teachers just like you are, and they're teaching full loads with 200 plus students as well, and kind of doing this in addition to that. So we know that we needed some guiding principles to help us with this process, and these, and sometimes are aspirational. This is what we hope all of our lessons have. This is how we would evaluate if we're going to change and add a new lesson. It would be because it better addresses a design principle and than an older one that we've been using. So, and we realize that that most teachers are not using patterns to 100% fidelity, but we really encourage that if you are using or substituting different lessons or labs for patterns, that you think about the design principles when you're doing those substitutions, because I think they can help all teachers maybe just make their lessons a little bit better. So at least that's what we are hoping. So first of all, we firmly believe in student-centered learning, and that we want students as scientists at the center of each course, and that they are given multiple opportunities to explain phenomenon and solve problems. We do not want a class of passive learners who are just asked to recite lists of information that were given to them by the teacher or a textbook. This is how I learned science, and I went on to become a scientist, a geneticist. Despite that, but I really believe that this will help our equity issue and help more students access science, so we can help them build their STEM identity and believe that they are capable of living in a STEM world with knowledge. This idea of collaboration. We want teachers to allow students to talk with each other, to share ideas, to be able to talk with a partner, with a group, within the class, and to build leadership skills. We've talked a lot already about the patterns approach to inquiry, and this is fundamental, that we want all of our labs to be patterns labs, where there is this process of wild guess, inquiry to determine the pattern, the making sense, and the data-informed prediction. So we hope that we're getting to the point where all labs are this way. We do realize that there's some that we are still working on, but this is our goal. And then, of course, enlarging on that and the patterns approach to engineering, that we're using data-informed engineering, that we're understanding, students understanding what the problem is. They're making multiple solutions in this divergent thinking, and then they're narrowing in convergent thinking to what is the best solution, and then how do we optimize, evaluate, and communicate that solution to others. We have a variety of engineering projects, and not everybody does all of these. And in chemistry, we particularly have a lot of choices for specific units where there might be 3 or 4 choices of a lab. And a lot of this comes from other teachers sharing with us what they're doing, and they're in a patterns format. And we gladly share engineering labs. We would gladly share a patterns lab that you had developed with others through our network. So we welcome that there can be this choice, because we realize that some of these labs, especially in chemistry, candy engineering can be fairly costly to set up, because you need food safe glassware, you need candy molds, etc. And chapstick, which I see is misspelled, I apologize, is a relatively inexpensive, but also attends to the same performance expectations. So we're working to get a variety of labs in here, so that a variety of departments with varying budgets can still provide this experience for students and be able to afford it. We're really working hard to have our curriculum be culturally responsive, and to pick phenomenon that students would be interested in, that they actually want to learn about, so they see themselves as scientists and they see science in the world. We want a classroom where students are comfortable and care about each other, and a lot of that comes with them talking with each other and knowing each other's names. We, as much as we can, we really believe the phenomenon should be place-based. And I know with our rural teachers that we're starting to work with, we're trying to expand beyond the Portland metro areas where some of our phenomenon are based, to see where and how could a phenomenon in a different part of Oregon also be relevant, if that's something that you would like to be interested in. We have an upcoming rural teacher focus group in our flyer that we'll share with you later. And trying to build in this idea of social and environmental justice, which really comes along with climate change. And we do see a number of our units in biology, especially, who are trying to tackle this. Differentiation is definitely an area that we're working on to provide areas of support and challenge for students. And this is an area that we do also still welcome contributions from anybody who's teaching patterns that would be willing to share back with us. We have tried in our teacher notes to provide guidance on this, and we're trying to also provide guidance for our emerging bilingual students. And this is definitely a work in progress for us, and we try every year to add more supports. Language rich is important to us because, and this is really from Oki Lee, that science is taught in conjunction with language, and we want students to be able to use and access academic language, but they might be using colloquial language to start with and moving towards academic language. And we want them to be able to speak, to write, to interact, to read, and to listen. And we have a variety of protocols that we use to help support student discourse. We feel like this is incredibly important aspect of patterns in any kind of science instruction, that students are talking, and we know that they just may not talk because you want them to, and a protocol goes a long way in helping support academic discourse in the classroom. And then three-dimensional assessment. We want instruction to be three-dimensional. We want assessment to be three-dimensional as well. And we want there to be assessment both on the core ideas, but also on the cross-cutting concepts and the science and engineering practices. So in NGSS world, all three of these are important. We do not want to be just assessing on content. That is not really keeping in line with the intention of NGSS. And we also want there to be ongoing formative assessment. We're trying to identify which activities are good formative assessment opportunities. We are working right now to develop three-dimensional learning objectives for every lesson. This is something that came from our NGSS review, so that we have those daily learning targets that are three-dimensional as well. So that's coming soon. Mm-hmm. And just, we're just trying to improve as we go.
Thinking about impacts, we're going to look at the impacts from the district, the teacher, and a student. So the biggest impact, or one of the biggest impacts, the impacts of patterns, is on teachers. And sometimes there can be fear that this is taking something away from teachers, taking autonomy away from teachers, taking agency away. That is absolutely not the goal or the intent. The goal is to empower teachers to have the very best resources for them to use, to modify, to adapt to their specific environment. So it's really to provide something much better than a textbook ever could. And so having a common sequence allows teacher to teacher collaboration within a building or a department, across buildings, and even across schools and districts. That individual teacher is not alone to figure out a solution to a problem. There can be others working on that, other teachers that are also teaching the same things. That reduction in the prep load by having a built out course for teachers to use can be really helpful and let teachers stretch and focus on the areas of most need or what is most important to them. There's also greater efficiencies when you're not having to develop everything for every day alone. You can focus on that differentiation and meeting the needs of your specific learners. It also, thinking of a school, when you have the ninth graders taking physics, you can then balance across those classes by not having so much variety within the classes offered at the ninth grade. Same for 10th, same for 11th. So you can balance that burden across your teachers by having that common sequence. Next slide. For the districts, we have students who move, and oftentimes it is our most vulnerable students who move the most often. And so having a common sequence allows a student to move and still be in the same course, have that course available to them at the district where they land. We have found stories where students will come to a class, 2 months into a semester, and oh, wow, I was taking that class at the high school I was coming from, even in a different district. And they feel now on step to continue in their new place, when many of their courses are brand new and they are really starting on a back foot because they are coming in new and different and haven't been there the whole time. So they're trying to catch up. So this is an opportunity to have those students be able to step right into that 9th grade or 10th grade or 11th grade science course and be on pace and ready to go. It also allows for that professional development to meet the needs of teachers by not having so many courses that you're having to prepare them for. This helps with efficiencies also around material purchasing. You can have the district order materials for the different schools, and it doesn't have to be on the burden of every single teacher separately to source the materials that they need for the next year or they need for the next semester. It also helps with recruitment and training for those incoming teachers, so they can be ready when maybe there was a district offered a PD last year. Well, this new teacher wasn't there. How do we get them up to speed so that teacher can be successful as well? I love these maps. We are always doing our best to try to figure out who's implementing patterns, and know that we take the term implementing as what we understand as some version of an adoption. So we are, again, always doing our best to have that to understand. And you can see from this map who we understand to be implementing patterns now. And this is, based on conversations that folks have reached out to us or others. These are our PD participants coming from so many districts across Oregon, joining us for PD.
Sorry.
That's okay. We've expanded beyond Oregon, so there are additional schools joining us for professional development from outside the state. If you are joining us now from outside Oregon, welcome. We're glad to have you here. A tiny caveat: we aren't allowed to pay you for your time. Sorry, but we're still glad you're here. And we are happy to welcome folks from wherever they come, and any Oregon teacher can be paid a stipend for their time.
So we know that we want to share some data. And so due to the RAP grant, which is this well-rounded access, is it program that that is funding us right now, we're able to pay teachers. We have seen an increase in the professional development, the number of teachers that are accessing professional development. And COVID, where we had to pivot and provide everything virtually, allowed us to move from what was primarily in-person PD to now what's primarily virtual PD. So we hope that we're able to reach more people because of that. And especially if you don't live, even in the Portland metro area, it can take you an hour to get from one side of the town to the other. So I think this is something that we've found to be very valuable. I'm going to share the Portland Public student data that I took when I was an administrator there. And just to show you some of the data trends and the impact on students. And I really highly recommend that if you are thinking about implementing patterns or a single science sequence, that you look at your data and hold yourselves accountable to the fact that whatever it is that you're changing is actually impacting student outcomes. Because I think that's really, we don't always do that in education. We have the next great idea, then we do it, but we don't really measure the impact. So I was really set that both in Beaverton and Portland that I would be looking at those impacts in the data that I had available. And in both cases, I saw similar trends. It's just that Portland data is more recent than the Beaverton data that I took. So the number one thing that you'll see is that we went from pre-implementation to very few students accessing NGSS standards to most students, or nearly all students accessing. And some of this, the reason it's not 100% is that we have transfers that come into the district that are coming from other places who may have non-NGSS aligned courses. That we saw an increase in enrollment in AB and IB courses. The increase was actually a greater percentage in Beaverton than in Portland Public, and I'm not sure why that is, but we saw this steady increase. So that idea that there was not a dip in AP course enrollment as a result of patterns implementation and had students taking those full year courses. And I really believe that those full year courses prepare students to be more successful in AP and IB, and it prepares a more diverse student population for being successful in those courses. And I actually have some data on that I'm going to show you. So this is the percent of total population enrolled in courses, because as you may know, when you go by numbers, you don't know, is that because of increased student enrollment or overall total students, or is it a percent students? It actually was a percentage of students. This is the data that I was talking about. This is HU represents historically underserved students. This is generally students of color, low socioeconomic students are in this HU category. And this is the difference rate of the non-HU pass rate versus the HU pass rate. And then I also mapped the difference between them. For AP Biology, the AP Biology test. So and this is from I would get this from our AP coordinator who would send me this data. And what we saw was this gap between HU and non-HU in 2016 and 17 of 38% pass rate difference, decreased to a 5% difference between HU and non-HU. And to me, this is one of the strongest arguments for implementing rigorous courses for all. And in physics, we actually saw that the HU pass rate was higher than the non-HU pass rate for the 2020-21 exam. And when we saw this, we couldn't believe our eyes, that we were jumping from joy to go from a 24% gap difference to a -4, where the HU pass rate was higher. The one thing that we saw that was one of the greatest things that increased was the dual credit science enrollment. And this is because we systematized it at PPS. And I worked on that in Beaverton as well, where we aligned the junior biology course to Bio 101. And in Beaverton, we did it to Bio 101 and 102. In Portland, we just did it to Bio 101 with our community college, so that students were dual enrolled in the high school course and in the PCC dual credit course. The courses are virtually exactly the same. And that we had to make no modifications to the curriculum for that alignment for Bio 101. We would have had to make more changes for the Bio 102 because, and that's the reason, is because a lot of the taxonomy and classification that still exists in a college biology course does not exist in the NGSS standard. So you do have to add content for that 102. And then our Bio 103, we picked up with our AP anatomy and physiology, so courses, and aligned those. So that is something that if you're interested in learning about that, I have some information on the process of how you go about it. Just please contact me. And then we looked at just pass rates and our failure rates. And over the years, because a lot of people were telling us the failure rates are higher in physics, and I was like, no, they're not. And they say, yes, they are. And I go, and so I went into the historic data and mapped this out from 2013 to 14. You see this dip in 2019-20 because this is the spring where we were not allowed to fail students. So there's zero failure rate. But the overall trend of the implementation is a declining failure rate for all courses, which is what we want to see. Now, we would love to get that down even lower. And if you're really interested in that, I really recommend that you take the Grading for Equity PLC that we're offering, because they really talk a lot about grading fairly for students, because sometimes failure rate is not always a student problem. Sometimes it's an assessment and a grading problem. But we're making progress, or we were making. The other interesting data that I took, and each one of these dots represents a high school in Portland Public, was the failure rate was lower in schools that took more PD. Where the teachers were participating in more PD, the failure rate of students was lower. So the fact that you're here tonight after you've worked all day with students and you have families and things that you want to do, that actually helps. That kind of learning mindset is what makes really great teachers, and really great teachers have more successful students in the system. So I applaud you for being here. And our own data shows that when teachers do come to PD, students do better.
Thanks, Susan. The role of STEM hubs. So this specific project is funded. I mentioned when we started here that there's a RAP grant to Portland State University and a RAP grant to GoSTEM at Eastern Oregon University. Portland Metro STEM, we are based at Portland State, and so that is part of that grant, and the balance is at GoSTEM. And I'm going to share a little bit here about the role, and also encourage you to connect to your local STEM hub. So in case you don't know what a STEM hub is, I'll give you a tiny overview here. Think of us as a collective impact partnership. We are regional networks focused on early learning, clear through, kids pursuing whatever it is they want to become, clear through post-secondary. We connect to industry, we connect to higher education, we connect to community-based organizations, schools, districts, yes, and so do connect to your local STEM hub. They can provide resources, connections, all sorts of things to help bring relevance and opportunities to your students. Specifically connected to this project, funding from ODE and grants. we bring to support this high school science for all, paid professional development for teachers. We pay for a PD that occurs outside of contract time. We have also paid for sub-release time when the PD was offered during the day, and we're always happy to consider that opportunity as that happens, as those opportunities are available. We also support content councils. So much of the iteration for the physics, chemistry, and biology curriculum is coming from teacher leaders, implementing teachers from multiple districts who come together to think about and make changes. And what is going to work better? What are they hearing from their colleagues? What are they hearing from their students? We also support a coordinating council. Those are folks looking at the 3 courses together, thinking about that district perspective, that full student experience perspective, those alignment needs and opportunities. One of those opportunities is around, you'll notice the picture there, that's taken at TimberCon, and that is connecting to STEAM professionals and career-connected learning. Science, physics, chemistry, and biology aligns really well to our high-wage, high-demand industries in Oregon. Those vary around the state a little bit, but there are, healthcare, manufacturing, construction, tech, agriculture have really strong and wonderful science underpinnings. And so connecting to local industry can be a way for your students to see just how what they're learning in your classroom is really important out there in the world. We do support the ongoing curriculum and development and iteration. So that ongoing curriculum and resource development, that is happening all the time. We welcome thought partners. We welcome your input on how we move that forward. It's important that we collaborate in this process. So Susan shared that this began in Beaverton as a one district effort. It then expanded to include Forest Grove, and that was the beginning of the sequence. And in a stunningly short amount of time, we had expanded to serving more than half of Oregon's students in these classes. And so really that collaboration is so important. We need voices from around the state, and from new to patterns, new to teaching, to veterans who've been at this a while. So we really welcome that. Also, COVID distance learning was a bit ago, but because of the content councils developing curriculum, they were able to produce full distance learning course curriculum for physics, a full course for chemistry, and a full course biology ahead of when teachers needed it. To our knowledge, we are the only curriculum that was available with paid professional development for teachers for COVID, to meet that distance learning need. And so that opportunity to be there when teachers really, really needed resources is something that I'm incredibly, incredibly proud of. We've gotten to partner with industry. And again, that's such an important part that STEM hubs across Oregon are doing and can continue to do in support of your efforts. We're happy to help, as are your others. On the RAP grant specifically, Portland Metro STEM and GoSTEM, based out of Eastern Oregon University, are looking at equity reviews. And those reviews are looking at emerging bilingual learners, BIPOC learners, students with disabilities, rural students, students who have to access the curriculum online only. And the focus there is around those learners where there is not a teacher available to provide the course to them. And so those reviews are in process. That NGSS review that Susan mentioned earlier is a part of this area of work. And so again, we really welcome and seek that teacher input. Please do reach out. Please reach out to one of us. Please reach out to your local STEM hub director. We want to welcome you in and hear your voices there. And the final is on the career connected learning. So CCL stands for career connected learning. And it matters that students can see relevance in their world. And it can also help them make a choice to take a CTE pathway, or take an advanced class, or take an internship. We really want to show them how their classes can be springboards, how an interest sparked, in this case in science, can be pursued in other areas. You can note there the role for GoSTEM and Portland Metro. Stipends do come from the Portland Metro STEM side of the grant. So Portland State is the payer for all of those. So that's why teachers will be interfacing with PSU in order to be paid for those stipends. And then you can see how those equity reviews are organized across our two hubs. And all the source it's open source. The curriculum is available. We have 6 Google Drives. There is an open source for physics and a restricted, an open for chem and a restricted, and an open for biology and a restricted. And the goal for those restricted drives is that we need to be sure that it's a teacher who has access to that curriculum because it also contains keys and other information that perhaps students don't or shouldn't have access to. So it's all available, and we will post those links into the chat. Again, you'll also have access to this deck.
So we have some upcoming webinars, and I'm going to put the link to our full course offerings here in the semester 1 flyer. And there is a Unit 1 Inquiry and Patterns workshop, and workshops are a little bit of a deeper dive. Webinars are an overview, and they're pretty much going over the main features of the unit in lesson by lesson. Workshops take a deeper dive into 1 or 2 of the activities where you will engage as both a teacher and a student doing those activities. So physics has both webinars and workshops, and chemistry and biology just have webinars. So we have these for every unit. Our goal is that for webinars and workshops that have already occurred, we had several last week, that in the flyer, we will be putting the links to the YouTube video of that webinar and the PowerPoint of that webinar to make that available for you as well. We also have non-unit courses, and one is we're having a webinar for student discourse that's coming up in later September. That's a 2-part webinar. And then we also have a student discourse PLC. And the PLCs, and you also could see we have an equitable grading PLC, is really for teachers who want to meet ongoing multiple dates, and we pay you for each time that you attend, to practice what we're talking about or you're learning about in the webinar. And in the PLC for student discourse, we're asking you to go and try a protocol and then come back and share with your colleagues, and then ask for collegial support and input on a problem of practice. And we take turns with that problem of practice of who's presenting what they've done. And in equitable grading, they do the same thing. They have a little bit of a webinar, and you can see the topics of the webinars there. This is a very powerful PLC with teachers across Oregon talking and learning about standard-based grading and learning and equitable grading. So if you're interested in that, we have 2 great presenters, Andrea Leach and Christy Miller, who did it last year, and people really found it to be very useful. So we have these kind of, and we also have Desmos trainings. We have added a lot more Desmos this year. This is based on feedback. We know that different teachers have different comfort levels with Desmos, and we want to support with both like basic Desmos, advanced Desmos, and then Desmos specific to like a physics Desmos, a chemistry, and a biology. So you'll see those in the flyer as well, and we encourage you to sign up for anything there that you feel would be useful to you. We had teachers email me and ask, if I took a webinar last year, can I take it again this year? And the answer to that is yes, as long as the funding allows. And right now the funding is allowing for that through the grant. Yep. And so if you want to repeat a course that you've taken and attend the webinar, you can do that. But then you can also If you want to do it just in time or on your own time, we will make those YouTube video recordings available for you to look at as well. We have
If you haven't had,
do we want to show this video here, part of this?
I think it's a pretty good one.
Yeah, okay. So we're just going to take a minute and hear a little bit. Can you hear
The
sound
Patterns
wise?
High School Science Sequence is a 3-year science course pathway and curriculum aligned to the next generation science standards. The sequence consists of freshman physics, sophomore chemistry, and junior biology courses. Each course utilizes common instructional strategies, real-world phenomena, and engineering design challenges where students are active participants in their learning. The curriculum is a combination of teacher-generated and curated open content materials. Professional development workshops for educators are offered each summer in the Portland metro area.
When we had biology at the sophomore level, so much of biology now is molecular biology, not the traditional, classification type biology that many of us had. And, we were just seeing extremely high failure rates with our students because as soon as we went inside the cell and started talking about chemical reactions, we lost students and it was hard to pull them out then after that. So we knew that biology was probably not in a great spot at the sophomore year, but also knew that chemistry would have to precede biology then in order for them to be more successful in modern biology. And then, so when we were thinking that chemistry would have to precede biology, then, again, energy storage and transfer, that comes in physics, need that before you really get into how that's going to work with chemicals breaking, atoms breaking apart and recombining and energy being released or absorbed. So really that seemed to be the most coherent sequence and the one that really makes sense when you really think about the curriculum as a whole and not just as a alphabetical way to organize them.
All the students end up learning a problem-solving approach from physics without having, before, so many people, adults that I hear around, have never taken physics, and so they never got that problem-solving approach.
I would describe the Patterns approach as a student-centered, three-dimensional way of students learning science that emphasizes the scientific practices of engineering, inquiry, and modeling. And then once students do that, then they normally apply that then to an engineering project at the end of the unit. The Patterns approach really typically starts with most investigations where students are taking a wild guess. So an example of that might be, what is the population on the Earth going to be in 2050? So you get a wide variety of answers because they're doing just that, they're guessing. And so from then they break out into different research groups where they're all basically taking a sub-question, and all of those sub-questions are addressing something a little bit different. And I really like that because it really holds students accountable for doing their best work because they might be the only group that's reporting back to the class about that particular.
I'm going to pause that there just because I want you to know this resource exists. And if you have other teachers who need a nice video, several of the people that were in that video are teacher writers for the curriculum and have been involved in the development of the curriculum. And it's a great little video. I put the link into the chat, and then it's also in the PowerPoint if you have that. So I just want to make sure before we end here that you have at some point today completed the attendance form, because we are now relying on teachers completing this very short Google form to mark their own attendance for the webinars. This is a new thing this year. We think that we'll be less likely to miss people and make sure people get paid by doing it this way. So I put that link in there. And then because this is being funded by the RAP grant, we do have an exit survey that will ask you some questions about your own patterns usage or how you found out about patterns that are really for our grant reporting. And we would really, really appreciate it if you took a minute to give us and complete that information. I tried to make it as streamlined, like Likert scale, So you could do it quickly as possible, and then also some feedback on the webinar itself. So I think I will, did we put the link? Yes, we did. I'm gonna
Mhm.
exit this here. And then we can answer any questions that anybody might have, any comments, anything that we didn't cover that you want to know more about, anything that you want to tell us. We'd really appreciate that if this has been useful to you.
I was wondering about I mean, a while ago, I think I signed up for a focus group, like the urban focus group. What, is that still happening or?
There is a rural focus group that is about to happen. It's in
Okay.
the flyer. We did
Oh,
have
yeah, I saw that, but no, like other ones that I might qualify for.
if I think you may have, were you interested in signing up for the equitable focus group? That has not started yet.
Yeah.
I was waiting for
Okay.
school to start. And Christina,
Okay,
you
cool.
have your name on that, and so I'll be sending an email out to you so you can join
Okay,
us
no
for that.
rush.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay, cool.
Thanks for checking in.
Okay, sweet.
Yeah,
Yes,
thanks for your
thank you.
interest.
Yes.
Other questions? All right. Well,
Hey,
if there aren't any
thank you for being
questions,
here, and I'm
Yeah.
hoping people are still maybe signed in because they're doing the exit ticket. Because we
Thank
really
you
do
very much.
appreciate that. We want to be data informed as we're asking our students to be.
excellent. Thanks, everybody.
I'm finishing up the exit ticket.
Awesome.
Excellent. Thank
Hope it
you.
wasn't too cumbersome for you there. Have a great school day tomorrow and a great start of your school year.
Thanks for all you do. All right, Susan, we can probably end the
Oh, I should
recording.
pause the record. I should end the recording. Whoa. Why do I never remember to